no one's done it before the way we did it. So I guess it takes flexibility, a sense of history, a sense of the present, some idea of what it is you're trying to do, some amount of resilience, because everyone had ideas how to do it, but in the end we were the people who had to do it. And a sense of humour, because why would you think you'd ever have to do this? And at one level, everyone's going to be out to say you didn't do it the way they would have done. At another level, I think what we achieved was actually people said, wow, that was a really good thing you did there. Thank you.
My role was to head up the Legacy Task Group, and that is quite, or can sound like quite a vague concept. What is legacy? And while everybody else was busy practically making sure that March the 26th and thereabouts all happened, I'd got a longer time scale, really, thinking about what's it going to be like when it's all over? What do we carry with us after we've done all the busyness? And what is important to hand on to future generations? So some of that was about tourism, but more of that was about educational matters and just thinking through what the story's all about, what the story of 500 years ago is all about, and what today's story was all about.
So I'm the Dean of Leicester, and I was acting on behalf of the cathedral as the person responsible, I guess, for the reburial of Richard. So the university, during their phase of investigation, under the licence that was issued by the Ministry of Justice, had responsibility for those human remains. But once they came on site, it became my responsibility to ensure that the remains were treated properly and were buried with Christian ceremony, and everything was done as well as it could possibly be done.
To be honest, we were blown away by the public reaction at the time of the reinterment. We knew there was a lot of public interest in advance, but it was very hard to quantify what that would be. But in the event, during the period of lying in repose, when the coffin was in the cathedral and the public were invited to come, as a matter of public record, we managed the response, but it was overwhelming. Over 20,000 people filed past that coffin in 2.5 days. And we managed to keep going the worship of the cathedral, which has always been very important to us while that was happening. And afterwards, we knew people would keep coming. We didn't quite know the measure. I mean, in the event, during 2015, over 210,000 people came to the cathedral to see the tomb of Richard III, I guess. I mean, who knows why people came, but you know, the years previously, you know, it was 1/10 of the amount of visitors. So is that a problem? Yes. Is it an opportunity? Absolutely. So we've been living in what we call the new normal since then, of welcoming all these people into our cathedral, most of whom are interested in the story of Richard. They want to see the tomb. The other thing they want to see is the pall, which was over the coffin, which is on display here, and the crown that went with it.
And if you walk around this cathedral, you can see lots of display panels explaining a little bit of the Richard story, as well as obviously the artefacts, the crown and the pall and so on. But we were very determined that we had a story that connected, that wasn't just a historical story. It's not just about this happened 500 years ago and this happened in 2015, but actually this is something about the continuity of human living.
Yeah, it was very important to us that we made sure that all the way through this phrase dignity and honour marked everything we did, and that was the phrase the cathedral came up with. And often at board meetings and so on, I would ask people the question, how does that thought show us what dignity and honour means? And if people weren't able to answer that question, then it was something we didn't do. And one of the things which was very important to me in that was I could see how excited people could get and how their imaginations would fire off in all kinds of directions. And that was great to see, but it sometimes meant that people lost sight of the person and this particular bit of story.
So the reinterment of Richard III enabled us to change that arrangement. So what we've actually done, for anyone who's been in the cathedral and sees it, there's a large wooden screen just to the west of the ambulatory, which we moved back a bay. So that was there, that marked the chapter house edge. There was a load of fixed seats in that area which have all gone. And so now we've turned the old chapter house into two spaces. One is a new sanctuary, the main centre of worship of the cathedral, with a new altar right under the tower in the middle. And then behind that is the ambulatory where the tomb is, taking up the other half of the space.
What it's done for us, it's kind of catapulted us into a different way of being cathedral, because we are a smallish building for a cathedral. We didn't have that many visitors. We were visited, but only by people who, had a reason to visit the cathedral. Now we've got mass tourism coming in. So it's very important that we respond to those visitors. And we often make the saying, pilgrims or tourists or both. People come through these doors, coming because they want to see a tomb. But then they may be touched by the building. They may well light a candle or say a prayer. How we welcome them, how we make them feel at home, and how they go away feeling that this was a special place is really quite important to us.
So we found this order of service, and it took a story from the Bible, which is a very important story, which you find at the end of the book of Genesis, when the bones of Joseph, the great figure, of the technically dream coat and so on, that great figure, he died not back in his home country, and they moved his bones from Egypt back into the promised land. And so there's a great sense of tenderness about that, the sense of a story completing itself. And so that was the main motif in the order of service. And then we adapted it to make sense of it for a 21st century audience, and used the basic shape of that to provide the structure for the service.